Hi, I'm standing outside Changi Prisoner of War Camp Memorial in Singapore. This is the old Changi jail. And during World War II, this was the notorious POW camp that housed Australians, English, Dutch, and American POWs. One of those POWs was James Clavell, the individual who went on to write the magnificent novel Shogun. He spent 3 years here. He entered as a young 18-year-old boy. He described his experience here in Changi as being his university. What an attitude. But this is his story and how he came to write Shogun and how Shogun became the best-selling book when it came out in 1975 and then went on to become this magnificent television program that we've all enjoyed in 2024, enjoyed by millions all around the world and winning all sorts of awards. So there's a lot of lessons on leadership from James Clavell and also the book and the film of Shogun. Let's talk more about it.
Okay, I am back. We're going to continue to talk about Shogun, the book, the drama series, and in particular the author. And of course, this discussion is in the context of leadership, change, and adaptive work. Now in part 1, this video, we'll discuss the author, James Clavell. In part 2, the next video, I'll talk about Shogun, the story, and its implications for leadership and authority. Now the book and the drama series, they are not explicitly about leadership, but primarily about authority dynamics, politics, power, strategy, culture clash, and what have you. But the writing of the book and the making of the film, they are about leadership and adaptive work, cultural leadership. James Clavell and the makers of the drama series, they are change agents, cultural change agents. And that's a form of leadership, an expression of leadership. Now, leadership gets people to face problematic realities and engage in activities that add value to their institutions, their communities, and to the world. Real leadership stimulates and orchestrates problem solving, sense making, creative work, innovation, bridge building, and positive change. Authority, on the other hand, is a group role, a tribal function. It manages boundaries, it maintains order, it protects the group, it coordinates work, and it plays a symbolic role to orient people and to represent their highest values. And authority, when needed, leads the group in battle. Now, with that in mind, all groups need leadership and authority. You need leadership to progress, to address complicated problems, to create and innovate, and you need authority to manage the prevailing order, shall we say. Now, leadership can be expressed not only from a dominant authority figure, leadership can be expressed and exercised in so many ways from multiple people in various roles, and also through a variety of different medium, even through the medium of literature and television. Literature, television, film, plays, dramas, they can contribute to helping groups and society deal with difficult and complex problems, adaptive challenges. Let me explain. James Clavell, he wrote Shogun in 1975, and it instantly became a bestseller. It was turned into a drama series first in 1980 and again, as you know, in 2024. And in 2024, Shogun was the highest rated drama on television around the world and won numerous awards. People could not get enough of it. A very compelling story with wonderful acting, and the filming was outstanding. It was made with a lot of talent, integrity, and a commitment to authenticity at so many levels, in terms of the script, the costumes, the sets, and what have you. Now, Hiroyuki Sanada, the star, he was also one of the producers. He played the role of Shogun, Lord Toranaga. He said he would only do this if it had authenticity, if it had that ring of truth. And Sanada and his team, they hired experts in the field to design costumes and build the sets and orchestrate the battle scenes and what have you. And Sanada meticulously reviewed the script for cultural accuracy to ensure it sounded natural and it was true to Japanese culture and not simplified or modified for a Western audience. And when filming the drama, he would personally correct the postures and the movements and the speech of the actors to ensure that the nuances and the subtleties were realistic and faithful to the time. Now, in giving that attention to detail and ensuring the story was told with integrity, that was a continuation of the leadership work begun by James Clavell. The drama series, as with the book, was an intervention into the wider world, we might say. Now, it had to honor the cultures it represented, but it also had to tell a story of the human condition, a story that had substance, was engaging, that shed light on the human condition, the darker elements of the human condition, but also the brighter or more positive or enlightened elements. And it had to contribute to cultural bridge building in how the series was made with Japanese and Western cast and crew, and certainly in how the story was told. It had to be a story that was more than a shallow romantic tale with pretty people, as Hollywood is notorious for. It had to be more than the binary good versus bad trope that is also so common in Hollywood. And it had to be more than another white man as the hero saving the day, as with Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai. By the way, Hiroyuki Sanada, he was in that movie, The Last Samurai. He was probably the best part of it. He was outstanding. Now, let's go back to James Clavell, the author. I want to tell you about James Clavell, because through his writings, not just Shogun, but different novels, he is actually exercising a form of leadership. He is a change agent, a cultural change agent, and his medium of intervention is literature and film. Now, while Clavell might not be Shakespeare, it's in that tradition that he writes. He writes for the common man, for you and me. He writes to entertain, but he also writes to educate, to inform, and to illuminate aspects of ourselves, the dark side of ourselves and the brighter sides. And he also writes about power and influence and the moral dilemmas of those in authority. And he writes about the foibles of those who gain power and those who seek power. And he wrote many novels. A few of them were about Japan and others were about China. His passion, his aim was to understand Asia and to help us understand Asia, its history and its culture, and to help the West see the ways it has interacted with Asia, in particular Japan and China, often in ways that have been demeaning, disrespectful, and even abusive. He wants the reader to appreciate and be curious about Japan and China, and we might call his leadership work bridge building, generating a connection, reducing the mystery of the other, even seeing the beauty of the other. So where did this drive come from? What formative experiences did he have that led him going down this path and making this kind of bridge building contribution? Well, as I said at the beginning, this begins for him as a young soldier. As a 17 or 18-year-old when he joined the British Army, World War II had just begun and he was sent to Southeast Asia. His transport ship was attacked and sunk by the Japanese before he even saw battle. He was also shot in the face and wounded. After hiding out and recuperating in a Malay village for 6 months or so, he eventually was captured by the Japanese and found himself a prisoner of the Imperial Japanese Army in the Changi prisoner of war camp in Singapore. And he spent about 3 years as a POW in Changi. As you could imagine, it was a hard, brutal, and traumatic experience. But later in life, he said, Changi was not my prison. It was my university. How's that for an attitude? This is where his fascination with Japanese culture was cultivated. So rather than be bitter or vindictive, after the war he read everything he could about Japan, its history, its people, its culture, and he truly came to respect the culture. As you could imagine, the circle of people that he interacted with in England at least, survivors of the camps or of the war in general, they had nothing but contempt for the enemy, but not Clavell. Now in the Shogun story, the Englishman, Blackthorn, he initially despises the Japanese. He sees them as being brutal and sadistic and uncivilized. But by the end of the story, he has come to understand them, even to respect them. And that is true for Clavell. The message is subtle but profound. Our perceptions can change. We can learn from the other. And although there might be differences, even significant differences, if we persist and remain curious, those differences can be transcended and can lead to understanding, even to mutual respect. Now, while we are talking about Clavell, let me tell you about his first novel, King Rat. It was written in 1962, and it was turned into a movie, I think, in 1965. And a wonderful movie it was. Brilliantly told, brilliantly made, brilliantly acted. I encourage you to see the movie, and of course, to read the book. I have, at Harvard, I have my students watch the movie. There was many lessons on leadership and authority embedded in that movie. Now, it was a cathartic story for Clavell to write because it was about the POWs in Changi. He's writing about his experience there, but as a novel. King Rat is a tale of resilience, morality, and the human spirit, and also cultural tension and conflict. Cultural tension and us versus them dynamic, that's a constant theme in all of Clavell's stories. But the conflicts in King Rat, they're not just between the POWs and their Japanese overlords, but amongst the POWs themselves. King Rat is an American. He has this entrepreneurial bent, a can-do attitude, and he figures out how to exploit the system for his personal gain with all its constraints. Now, most of the other POWs, they are British or Australian. He's a con man who rises to be the alpha in the camp, the top dog. And he gets others to work for him and gives them rewards to keep them on his side. Everybody bows down to King Rat. He's King Rat because he captures rats, and he cooks the rats, and he trades them as chicken or deer meat. That's what people think they are eating, chicken. So he gains his power, his status, his authority, his crown as king of the camp, because he's providing a service that people want, even though he is deceptive in doing so. Now, the story is filled with these interesting moral dilemmas, fascinating power dynamics and group dynamics around culture, class, hierarchy, and authority. It's a very confronting and somber film that leaves you in a very pensive and reflective space. I remember a line from the book. I think it's in the film too. In war, even rats can become kings. In war, even rats can become kings. How true. Now, I have to say one more thing about the leadership work of James Clavell, the change agent work he did through literature and film. He wrote a script for another movie, and he also produced that movie, and he directed that movie. He'd never directed a movie before. That movie in the 1960s was To Sir with Love. You may have heard of it. Your parents, certainly your grandparents, they would have seen it. A marvelous movie starring the great actor Sidney Poitier about a black teacher in a white lower-class Cockney British school in London's East Side. The movie won all sorts of awards. It was a radical story in that it presented a black man as this gentle, patient, benevolent change agent who educates these young, wild and rowdy teenagers in this crazy school who are rude, rebellious, and even racist towards him. It was radical for its time because black men were portrayed in film, at least, in a very negative, stereotypical way. And here was a young black man wearing a suit and tie and trying to tell, or at least teach, young white teenagers how to be respectful, how to behave, how to be responsible, and how to have self-esteem. It's an amazing tale of leadership, authority dynamics, human development, cultural tension, and relationships. Who are we for one another? And what does it mean to care for or to help others, to contribute to their growth? But Hollywood was not excited about the making of the movie. They didn't want to make it. The studio executives said no one will want to see it. And at that time, there was too much racial tension in America with the civil rights movement in full swing. Protests and marches were going on all across the country. So many people felt that this would only add fuel to the fire. Some also felt that the story was too foreign, too bizarre, too controversial, too confronting, even though it's based on a true story. So the big executives, they said no to Clavell. but Clavell really pushed for it. He was committed to the story. He knew that this was an important story that needed to be told. And given his popularity as a novelist, he leveraged off that recently gained power, and he convinced the studio to give him some funds and to take the risk. Now, they hummed and they hawed, but eventually gave it the go-ahead, but under certain conditions. They didn't pay Clavell or Sidney Poitier. I think they gave them a per diem or an allowance or something, but it was peanuts. They didn't want to take the financial risk, but they said that both men could have a small percentage of the profit. If it does well, you get something. If it doesn't, the loss will be minimal. Anyway, the film was a great success, an extraordinary success. The movie was very well made, wonderfully acted, and the theme song from the movie, To Sir With Love, that's the name of the song. It was sung by Lulu, who was also one of the stars of the movie. That song became the #1 hit around the world, including the United States. So here you have a script, a movie, and a song contributing to important bridge building work around the world, getting a lot of attention. And the movie shed light on the human condition and had a way of turning darkness into light, futility into hope. Now, on a personal note, I saw the movie To Sir With Love as a kid in Australia, in my hometown. It was one of the first movies I ever saw, and it shook me to the core. I'd never seen an African or an African American or a black person other than one or two Aboriginals. Nearly everyone where I lived was white. But wow, although just a kid, that movie touched me in a deep way. Sidney Poitier, he was fantastic. So Clavell's leadership work, shall we say, it began, or at least was seeded in Singapore's Changi jail, where he was a teenage prisoner during a time of war. And the work he has done of turning tragedy and suffering into something that enriches the human spirit and brings people together is profound, and continues to positively influence people all around the world to this very day. Think about it. That's an expression of leadership. Not leadership from a formal authority figure in the way we generally think about leadership, but leadership from a normal person who, through their own initiative and talent, puts something into the public space, that cultural space, that gets people's attention, engages people, stirs their thinking, starts a conversation, and ultimately changes their perspective. That's pretty amazing. That is indeed an expression of leadership. It is the stirring of important societal adaptive work and change. Okay, my next video, it will be part 2, where I continue to talk about Shogun. In that part, I'll analyze Shogun, the story, in the context of authority dynamics. It's an incredible story, as you know, with deep and profound insight into human nature, power, politics, and authority, and how to use it well, and the dangers of using it badly. I think you'll find it interesting. Now, the purpose of my channel. The purpose is to illuminate, to explain, and to talk about this critical feature, this critical aspect of human life, this thing we call leadership, real leadership. Getting people to face reality, realities that they would prefer to avoid, getting people to address shared problems, often complex problems, getting people to do the adaptive work of problem-solving, change, and innovation. Unfortunately, there's way too much counterfeit leadership in the world today, and that's not helping. I think we can all agree and appreciate that there is a desperate need for better leadership, for real leadership, for dynamic and effective agents of positive change, given how crazy things are. There are still wars going on. The fractures and the divisions between nations and within nations, politically and economically, these things are hugely disruptive to our lives. The tribal impulse has certainly been activated and exploited. And we still face these complex, multifaceted, interdependent problems that need real leadership and creative work. The stakes are very high. That's why I've created the channel. So support the channel. Hit the button below, the proverbial subscribe button. Your support helps. It helps the channel grow, and it helps get the message out. And I certainly value your support. Okay, thanks for listening, and Talk to you again soon. Take care.